So it was December of my first year here in California. I was an undergrad at USC, and it was crazy. Like Tara talked about, first of all, there were holiday decorations on palm trees. I came from Indiana, so this didn't make any sense. Campus was busy. People were taking finals, having parties. There was this celebration in the air and also a lot of anxiety in the air. And it was all new for me. And I didn't quite know what to do with myself. One slightly chilly evening, if you can call any evening chilly in Southern California, I found myself wandering around campus. And I came upon this little courtyard surrounded by these beautiful old 1930s brick buildings. And there was a teeny tiny little building in the middle of that courtyard that was labeled Chapel. All are welcome. I figured it would be locked, but I tried the door anyway. And surprisingly, it was open. And I went inside to this very small little chapel. No religious iconography on the walls, just a space for anyone who identified in any way. And I sat down on one of the pews in this dimly lit room. And there was something about that space, something about that moment that invited me to take that breath that I so badly needed. When I re-emerged finally from the chapel, I felt a little bit more like myself, a little bit more ready to deal with whatever might be coming my way that season. And as the 4 years went by at USC, I would return to that chapel over and over again. And guess what? I never saw anyone else there ever. It was my private space, my little sanctuary. Since then, I've found similar spaces everywhere. Did you know every airport has one of those? Every hospital has a space like that. But what I learned from visiting those spaces over time is that the stillness that I found there was not from the space itself. It was a practice that I was bringing to the space. As we've been hearing this morning, this season is incredibly complex. Ahead of us, we have some wonderful holiday services. Next week, we will be acknowledging Hanukkah. We have Kwanzaa coming up on the calendar. We have a Saturday night winter solstice service. We have a Christmas Eve service, the Sunday before Christmas. We have a Christmas morning service. We have all kinds of holiday services that will most likely stress the celebration and the joy of the season. But I would be remiss if we didn't start this season with an acknowledgement of all that we carry. None of our lives is easy, or at least easy all the time. I know the folks here are carrying so much complexity in your own personal lives. And I also was thinking, December 2025, if we think back a year to December 2024, and the journey that we have collectively and individually gone on in this time, it is quite overwhelming. And that's the thing about December. It shows up every year as a reminder of where we are in our journeys, both personally and collectively. It's a time when we notice things in our lives that maybe aren't quite what we would have them be. It's a time where we notice losses in a way that maybe we don't feel always as keenly throughout other times of the year. And I want to tell all of you this morning that throughout this whole season, whatever feelings you hold, they are welcome in this community, whether they are sorrowful or complicated or poignant or joyful. We have space here for whatever you bring. But the question becomes, what do we do in the midst of all of this? And we've heard some wonderful advice already this morning. I want to tell you about something that practitioners of Buddhist meditation talk about, particularly people like Jack Kornfield and Tara Branch. They talk about something that they call the sacred pause. The sacred pause. And what they say is that so often in our lives, what's happening to us is coming at us from all directions. And what do? We react to it, understandably. But the more we react, the more we start simply being reactive, and we lose sight of that stillness that is there and available at our core. So Jack Kornfield talks about stepping into this sacred pause when you need it. That moment when we pause, and that stops our actions from simply being automatic. It allows our heart to soften. It allows us to have more compassion for ourselves and others. There's a great story that NPR did a few years ago about an emergency room in a hospital in Virginia. And this emergency room had been dealing, as with the pandemic, they had been dealing with one after another patients dying, coming in, dying, and it had been such a revolving door of death that these folks working in that emergency room had grown numb to it. And they were aware that something had changed in the way they were caring for people. They couldn't find a way to really be present. And one of the nurses decided to put into practice this idea of the sacred pause. And so each time they experienced a crisis or death, she stopped and she closed her eyes and she paused. Now, whether she was silently praying or simply taking a breath or whatever, I don't know, but the point was she took that pause. Some of her colleagues started to notice this, and they decided to take that same pause too, until the entire emergency room was doing that in those moments. What they found was that pause allowed them to restore themselves to themselves, to find that still, whole, peaceful part of themselves right at their center, even when everything else seemed like it was going out of control. It changed the feeling in that emergency room. It changed the way these folks were caring for their patients. It brings to mind the words of poet Martha Postlewaite, who says, "We must create a clearing in the dense forest of our lives." I like that image because instead of it just seeming like what's going on in our life is just this chaotic stuff, it talks about it as a forest. We have a lot of wonderful things in our lives. But sometimes we need that clearing in the middle of all of those trees, of all of those things that are growing and blooming around us. Sometimes we need to create that clearing in that space. So we create that clearing through a variety of ways. Spiritual practices are one of them. And I wanted to find something that was really simple, that could speak to everybody, whatever your theological persuasion was, something that was scientifically backed. So I came upon something called tactical breathing, or box breathing. This is something that is used by first responders, it's used by firefighters, it's used by Navy SEALs, and it's used when they are in situations that are out of control, that are chaotic. So I'm going to tell you how this works, and then we're going to just practice it for just a moment, just so that you have something this season to begin thinking about as a way of meeting these moments that are sometimes overwhelming. But as I said, it's called box breathing, and it's the idea is 4 by 4 by 4 by 4. And so I'll talk you through this really quickly, and then we'll practice it. But you exhale, counting 4. And then with no air in your lungs, you count to 4. And then you inhale, counting to 4. Hold that air into your lungs for 4 beats. And then you exhale. And you do that same thing where you're inhaling or exhaling and then holding each time and counting to 4. And what they say this does is it actually lowers cortisol, the stress hormone. It reduces blood pressure, and it calms the sympathetic nervous system, and it helps to move the body out of the fight or flight status. So it's such a simple thing, but it has scientific backing for what it can do. So I'm going to invite you. Now, I know some folks have breathing problems and so on. This might be something you sit out. There are other spiritual practices not centered around the breath. Things like candle gazing and so on can be something that you can do. So please only do this if you feel comfortable doing so. But I'm going to invite you to go ahead and exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. It's that simple. That simple. It's a practice that you can take home. It's something you can do when you need to relieve yourself of stress. It's something that helps you move into a place where grief and sorrow don't just become crystallized inside you, but have a space to move and process as needed. And the same goes for joy as well. It's a way of saying to our bodies that you're here, you're safe, you're held. You know, every religious tradition teaches this idea of the stillness that is within ourselves. They have different names for it. In Buddhism, it's called the ground of our being. The Quakers talk about the inner light. Mystics talk about that small, still voice at our center. And humanists talk about the reflective capacity of consciousness. The point is, whatever the tradition, this lives within us, however we understand it. This place that we can connect to, this chapel that we build within ourselves and find. And sometimes it comes from unexpected places, unexpected times. I'm thinking of something that happened, just maybe a few weeks, if even after I started here at Tapestry. I received a call that Bart Bean, a longtime member, was going into hospice, and he wanted me to visit him at the hospital. Now, I had never met Bart, but after being here at the office, I stopped on the way home at the hospital and went to his room and sat down with him. And I said, I heard that you wanted to talk. And he said, yes, I do. And so I sat there in that hospital room and we talked. He talked about what it meant to go on hospice. He talked about his life. He talked about his loved ones. And that marvelous thing that sometimes, and only sometimes happens in a hospital, happened then. Everyone else left us alone. The room was quiet. The blinds were drawn. And as we sat there, I could feel that chapel surrounding us, that sacred space. Listening to his words about his own life was reconnecting me to that sense of my still inner self. Truly a holy moment. Reconnecting me in that busy day with my sense of self-compassion, my sense of compassion for others. So when he was done, I thanked him. I said, Bart, I thank you so much for sharing all of this with me. And he said, who's Bart? Bart had been discharged a couple of hours earlier. So this man reacted pretty much the way you just did. And I've been told that Bart would have reacted in a similar way as well. We never quite know what circumstances will bring us to a moment that feels sacred like that. A moment where we can invite someone else in, maybe not even the person we plan, into that moment of stillness, and they invite us into a moment of stillness as well, and we can share that. And that, my friends, is truly a sacred thing. This season, I invite you, as you are called to fully celebrate, to enjoy this season, enjoy the lights, enjoy the holidays that you celebrate, enjoy all the messages of hope and the ancient stories that spur us on into being greater human beings than we were before. Enjoy all of that, but also, in the middle of that, please take moments to find your chapel, to find the space and place and people you need to create that chapel. And within that silence, within that stillness, may you find the best of yourselves. Happy holidays, everyone.